Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to live at the end of an era? To watch a society, once mighty and prosperous, begin to crumble from the inside out? Today, we're going on a journey back in time, not to a specific battle or a famous ruler, but into the homes and onto the streets of a civilization on the brink. We're going to explore how economic struggles can ignite the flames of social unrest and hasten the fall of empires. Imagine a bustling marketplace, a place that was once the vibrant heart of the empire. Spices from the Far East, silks from distant lands, the air thick with the smell of freshly baked bread, and the sound of 1,000 different deals being made. For generations, this was a place of opportunity. A skilled craftsman could earn a good living, a farmer could sell his surplus for a fair price, and even a humble laborer could find work and feed his family. The empire was a promise of stability and a chance at a better life. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to change. The silver coins, once heavy and pure, started to feel lighter. They looked a little different, mixed with cheaper metals. The price of that loaf of bread, which had been stable for years, suddenly required a few more coins. Then a few more. This wasn't just a bad harvest year. This was different. The state, burdened by endless foreign wars and lavish spending by the elite, was running out of money. Devaluing the currency seemed like an easy fix, a way to stretch their dwindling gold and silver reserves, but for the average person, it was a disaster in slow motion. Their life savings, carefully tucked away, were evaporating into thin air. Now, let's leave the marketplace and walk towards the edges of the city. Here, the grand marble villas of the wealthy give way to cramped wooden tenements. This is where the majority of people live. For them, the economic squeeze wasn't an abstract concept. It was a daily, knowing reality. The cost of rent went up. The price of food skyrocketed. The meager wages they earned bought less and less each week. They saw the rich, the senatorial class, and the wealthy merchants seemingly unaffected. They still hosted extravagant parties, wore the finest clothes, and traveled in opulent litters carried by slaves. The gap between the haves and the have-nots, which had always existed, was widening into an uncrossable chasm. Think about a father, a stonemason, who spent his life building the very temples and villas of the elite. He used to take pride in his work and providing for his family. Now he's working longer hours for pay that barely covers their daily meal. He sees his children getting thinner, their eyes losing their spark. He looks at the opulent mansions he helped build, and a quiet, simmering resentment begins to build in his heart. It's a feeling of injustice, a sense that the fundamental promise of their society has been broken. Meanwhile, in the countryside, the situation was just as dire. Small family farms, the backbone of the empire for centuries, were being swallowed up. Crushing taxes, impossible to pay in the devalued currency, forced farmers to sell their ancestral lands to wealthy landowners. These landowners consolidated the small plots into massive estates called latifundia, worked by armies of slaves or desperate tenant farmers who were little better than serfs. Generations of proud, independent farmers were forced off their land, migrating to the cities in search of work that didn't exist. These newly landless citizens flooded the cities, creating a massive, unemployed urban population. They were angry, hungry, and desperate. They gathered in the forums and the taverns, their whispers of discontent growing louder. They spoke of the greed of the elite, the corruption of the officials who collected taxes only to line their own pockets, and the indifference of an emperor who seemed more concerned with palace intrigues than the suffering of his people. The government wasn't entirely blind to the problem. Their solution? Bread and circuses. They started providing a free grain dole to the urban poor to prevent mass starvation, and staged spectacular, bloody gladiatorial games in the colosseums to distract them from their misery. For a while, it worked. A full stomach and a thrilling spectacle could pacify the masses, but it was like putting a small bandage on a gaping wound. It didn't solve the underlying problems of inequality and economic despair. In fact, it made them worse, creating a dependent class and draining even more resources from the state treasury. This growing unrest wasn't just quiet whispers anymore. It started to boil over. Food riots became more common. A delayed grain shipment could spark a wave of violence in the streets. Tax collectors were ambushed and sometimes killed. Demagogues and populist leaders emerged, promising to champion the cause of the common man. often using the anger of the crowd for their own political gain. The social fabric, once strong and interwoven with shared values and a sense of common purpose, was fraying at the seams. The military, once a path to citizenship and social advancement, also began to reflect these divisions. Soldiers, often recruited from the poorer classes, found their pay was worthless. They felt more loyalty to their generals, who promised them bonuses and land, than to the distant, corrupt state in the capital. This led to a cycle of civil wars. As ambitious generals marched their legions against each other, vying for the imperial throne, each civil war was a devastating blow, destroying infrastructure, disrupting trade, and killing the very citizens the empire was supposed to protect. The empire was tearing itself apart. In this chaotic environment, people began to lose faith. They lost faith in the government, in the economy, and in the old gods who seemed to have abandoned them. They looked for new answers, new communities that offered a sense of belonging and hope. This is when new religions and mystery cults began to gain immense popularity. They offered a message of spiritual equality and a promise of a better life in the hereafter, which was incredibly appealing to those whose lives on earth were filled with suffering and injustice. This represented a profound shift in a society that had once been defined by its public, state-sponsored religion. So, as we stand here, looking back at the smoking ruins of this once great civilization, we see it wasn't a single event that brought it down. It wasn't just one barbarian invasion or one weak emperor. It was a long, slow decay from within. It started with economic decisions that hollowed out the middle class and impoverished the poor. This economic hardship bred deep social inequality, which in turn fueled resentment, anger, and division. This civil unrest weakened the state, making it vulnerable to both internal collapse and external threats. The story of this fallen empire is a powerful reminder that the true strength of a society lies not just in its armies or its wealth, but in its sense of fairness, its opportunities for all, and the shared trust that binds its people together. When that trust erodes, when the gap between the rich and the poor becomes a canyon of despair, the very foundations of civilization begin to crumble. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If you found this exploration interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more dives into the fascinating lessons of history. Let me know in the comments what you think is the most important factor in a society's decline. Until next time, stay curious.